Hello and welcome back to CNN IBN Deloitte Tax Corner. This is where we'll cut through the jargon like butter on ice and get you what this budget really means to you in terms of the taxes we pay. Now, we're going to talk about indirect taxes, and of course, the big question is, will the finance minister win an Oscar? Somebody's just won something out here. Why are you guys clapping? Okay, DiCaprio just won the Oscar. So for all the fans of DiCaprio, good news. And how many fans will P. Chidambaram garner? That's the other big question. And Mr. R. Muralidharan joining us from Deloitte. Thank you so much for speaking to us, sir. Let's go through some of the key taxes that need to be done. Now, what will the FM do? The first question, of course, will the finance minister increase the rate of service tax from the present 14.4%? What kind of impact will this have?
Yeah, there is a general expectation that the service tax rates will go up from the present level of 14.5 to say 16. Why I say this is, under the GST regime which will come after a year, the services are going to be taxed at around 18%. So FM may think that let us prepare the service recipients to a higher level of tax in stages. That's how we believe that it will go to 16. And this is going to impact each one of us. When you go and dine in a restaurant, or when you travel by air, or you take your life insurance premium, all of them are services and the costs are going to go up. We believe that the government has to do something specific where it is a consumer-related service, where the consumers consume it directly rather than an industrial service.
Okay, so that is bad news for us in a way. Now, the second point, of course, I was at a foundry in Chennai, and I saw a lot of automobile parts lying around, saying that, you know, they just don't have the kind of demand right now. So manufacturing sector needs a boost if you have to talk about Make in India and all kinds of things that the government, ambitious plans that the government has.
The manufacturing sector has been growing only at around 3%. So in spite of the initiatives for the manufacturing sector, the growth has really not happened. So what do we expect from this budget for the manufacturing sector? So I believe that the rate of excise duty, which is a tax on manufacture, they will remain at the current level. They won't be increased like what we expect on the service tax. But what the government could perhaps do is to sort of ease the procedures, because the manufacturing sector has a lot of procedures to be gone through, which increases the cost of doing business. The other one is the inverted duty structure. The manufacturing sector in India is today affected by an inverted duty structure, which is due to the 4% additional duty of customs, which is charged on the imports. And there is also free trade agreements where the goods come into India at cheaper rates of customs duty. So the manufacturing sector has been going through tough times. We believe that the government will address it in the current budget.
Right, so they are waiting eagerly. And finally, will there be proposals to ease doing business? Now that's something that the corporate sector has been talking about, and the government has been reaching out to them, you know, because of the ambitious plan. Again, I come back to, say, Make in India, Skill India, all the various plans that are there.
So as far as the ease of doing business is concerned, the government has done quite a bit, but there is still a long way to go. I will just pick up two things which the government perhaps could address in the current year budget. One is the refunds. Whether you are an exporter of services or goods, or you are an importer and reseller, there are service tax refunds, customs refunds, which are pending for quite some time. The government really needs to do something suo moto, call for the pendency of refunds and address it so that the Indian manufacturing and service sector gets benefited. There's one more thing which the government could perhaps do in terms of the ease of doing business, is to clarify the legislation. People want certainty in taxation. There are a lot of areas, particularly in the service taxes, as to what constitutes exports, what are intermediary services and so on. The government could clarify it for ease of understanding so that the disputes get reduced.
Right, and of course the last one, GST, all in red. Very important why it's in red. We all know that is something that the government needs to do on the GST front. It'll just be a step, although it'll take some time to be passed. This could be a step towards it.
Yeah, as far as GST is concerned, this budget is expected to be a step closer to the GST, and the tax changes which the FM will propose, he would have GST in mind. Two things could again happen here. Under GST, the central sales tax is to be completely phased out. As a step towards that, the government could reduce it to 1%. And lastly, but not the least, he could at least lay a clear roadmap as to when GST will come and what is it he wants to do to take it to the ultimate destination.
Right, so keep coming back. CNN, IB and Deloitte Tax Corner is where we, of course, cut down all the jargon for you, so you need to stay with us. Time now to go across to Shireen Bhan, who's standing by with a corporate guest. Shireen, I toss it to you with great bit of news. I know you're a great Leonardo DiCaprio fan, and I can tell you now that he's won. A shout of cheer went across in the newsroom when he did.
Well, I believe he got a standing ovation, so Leonardo DiCaprio has actually broken the Oscar jinx, and maybe this is going to be the finance minister's lucky day as well. Karma, who knows, that could rub off on the finance minister's performance here in Parliament as well. But be that as it may, we're here at the Confederation of Indian Industry talking to corporate India on what they expect Finance Minister Jaitley to do. Let me also make it clear that this is not just Arun Jaitley's budget. This is as much Prime Minister Modi's budget. Through the consultation process, you've had a panel of secretaries submitting their recommendations directly to the Prime Minister's office, to the Prime Minister. So this is not a solo performance by Arun Jaitley. This has the backing and it has the signature stamp of the Prime Minister as well. Let me bring in Rajiv Memani, Sanjay Reddy and Sumit Mazumdar into this conversation. Gentlemen, the economic survey projects growth between 7 to 7.75% with downside risk. It's a large range, and it also very clearly says that forget about 8% growth numbers, at least for the next 2 years. This number has gotten embedded in our consciousness, as he says, but let's be realistic. Let's recalibrate our growth expectations. Rajiv Memani, how crucial is this budget going to be?
No, I think it's a crucial budget because I think there is clearly the expectations from the government have been very high. The government has done a lot of things, but I think the benefit still has to be fully felt on the ground. So to that extent, I think it's an important budget. Also with a lot of global uncertainties happening around the world, you know, how India projects itself, how it prepares itself for a very volatile environment over the next 12 to 18 months, I think it's a critical. So like any other budget, it's a very critical budget. And I think the biggest thing is how does it give greater impetus to economic growth and people feeling that on the ground.
Rajiv, let me also ask you this in the context of what we saw the survey say, and we're getting, reports in that perhaps we could see the government rejig the tax slabs, but the survey makes a case for not doing that. Do you believe that there could be levers given to the Aam Aadmi to try and stimulate growth, to try and stimulate consumption?
See, I really doubt if there will be any rejigging of tax rates at the lower end. Because I think given the fact that, you know, oil prices have come down, there's no real inflation except food inflation. I think, and given the constraints and one of the things of expanding the base and getting more and more people in the system, my feeling is that they will probably leave that to the budgets that are closer to the elections. But in this budget, my guess is the stimulation of consumption will happen through the pay commission rise and could happen through lower excise duty.
But we should get ready to pay more by way of the service tax hike that is expected?
Service tax hike and also maybe some higher surcharges at higher levels of income.
Okay, higher surcharges for the well-off, whatever the well-off is going to be defined as. Sanjay Reddy, for infrastructure, we've just seen the railway budget and it's continuing to try and get out of what the Suresh Prabhu calls the under-investment vicious cycle. We've now seen a fairly elaborate capex plan for the railways. The hope is that the budget will take that forward as well. What would your key expectations be on the infrastructure front?
On the infrastructure, I think a lot of expectations around capital, especially on debt and equity. So one is how to deal with the banks. I think that is one. Recapitalization of banks is going to be extremely critical for infrastructure going forward. Without bank support, I don't think we can get it off the ground. And secondly, alternate means of financing in the debt side, the bond markets. It's been discussed for many, many years. So we are hoping that this year something more tangible will come out. And also on the equity side, I think you know that most of the equity in infrastructure, especially international investors, have disappeared. So how do we actually bring them back and get them excited about Indian infrastructure? Just one more point I wanted to make, given the global situation and especially also with the other BRIC countries, I think this is a huge opportunity for India and huge opportunity for the Modi government and the finance minister to reposition India and look at a fabulous next few years. So I think that opportunity, I'm hoping that the government will take advantage of.
Okay, but are you expecting big bang reforms? I mean, that's what we like talking about here at forums like this. Do you really expect big bang reforms or purposeful incrementalism?
I think big bang reforms, there's not much scope for it. I
Yeah.
mean, the expectation, unfortunately, is on one side realistic, where they think that they know the reality on the
Yeah.
ground, but on the other side is very high. So, we'll have to see how they play between these two ends of the spectrum.
Well, speaking of playing between the two ends of the spectrum, Mr. Mazumdar, what we are given to understand that there is now a clear acknowledgement within the government that perhaps its policy response to addressing the agri-distress, the rural distress has not been appropriate, has not been adequate, and hence this budget is likely to focus on that space. Is that your expectation as well?
On the rural side?
Yes.
Yes, I would expect the government would focus on the rural side because, as I mentioned, because of the two bad monsoons, the rural economy is stressed. Then something needs to be done. Money needs to be spent on infrastructure building or whatever, and modernization of farming and irrigation.
Okay, and as far as the corporate sector is concerned, let me ask all three of you, 1% or 1.5% or at least 1%, that's the headline corporate tax number cut that you would expect?
At least 1%.
At least 1%. Sanjay? 1%? 1%. What would be the biggest negative surprise, Rajiv, that you think we could see in this budget?
Well, the biggest negative would be, some increase in tax rates or the, long-term capital gains tax rate on...
Which would be bad news for the stock market.
Yeah, bad news for the stock market. And
Any additional cesses? There's talk of a health cess because they're looking at a mega healthcare scheme. So we could expect a cess on that front. Would that go down?
It's the same
badly?
thing. I mean, it translates into higher taxes at the highest level. I think if it goes beyond, 0.5%, then I think it'll have a negative reaction.
Okay, so that's what we're going to have to watch out for. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here to take us through your budget expectations from Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. We're counting down now, and you can see Leonardo DiCaprio there, his acceptance speech at the Oscars, the Oscar jinx being broken for Leo. But for now, Karma, I hand it back to you.